The business was doing a few $1 million in sales and under 10 people, right? It was a big leap of faith. I don't want to do things on the margin differently. I'm like, I want to do something that the world has never seen before. Beauty is an emotional category. It's an aesthetically driven category. And in order to communicate, you have to start from a place of brand. And that brand has to be matched with powerful products.
I have Olaplex in my shower. I think I told you before, and continue to use number 5.
Can you say that is Olaplex or that is Supergoop? You know when it's been nailed, when you're like, that just looks like something totally unique and different that no one else could do.
You disarmed the consumer and made it more fun and playful.
The hardest part of leadership is wondering, is it only me?
How have you taken your playbook from Supergoop over to Olaplex? Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Julian, and today I'm extremely excited to have a very dear friend of mine, Amanda Baldwin, join the pod. Hi, Amanda.
Hello. Good to be here.
So for those who don't know Amanda Baldwin, she's the CEO of Olaplex. I've known Amanda for a number of years. I think we first met in around 2013.
Yeah, I think we're coming up on more than 10 years for sure, which is amazing.
And a lot's changed since that first meeting. I think the first time I met you, you were about to give birth to your son, Henry.
He's 11, so there we go.
Exactly. Well, today, Amanda, there's so much to talk about. I'm a huge fan of yours, as you know. I think you're an incredible entrepreneur, and you've been able to build incredible businesses. And today, I really wanted to get this opportunity to dig a little deeper into, how you built the businesses you've done. So, Amanda, you and I both have similar backgrounds in finance and building, finance businesses in the past, and investing. And we both made that pivot over the line to beauty. I think it would be exciting to start there, how you did that and what made you do the move.
Well, thank you for having me. There's always a special joy of doing these things with someone you've known for a long time because you have a little bit of history and it's always just, it's fun to get to catch up with someone in addition to have a podcast together. My journey, I think in many ways, I was always wired to think about brands. And my earliest memories as a kid growing up in New York City were very much walking down Madison Avenue and thinking, well, why is that store doing better than this one? And just kind of having a genuine curiosity for what makes people tick through the manifestation of what they buy and the brands that they love. And so that's sort of the baseline of everything that's come since then. And I think I was probably 8, 9, 10 when I started to think about that way. But I started my journey in finance because I had a liberal arts education and I had this idea I wanted to go into business that I'm not sure I probably could have articulated further than that. And I was like, where do I go to learn the most and get the best foundation? And in 2000, when I graduated from college, there were, the ecosystem was very different than it is today. But I think the idea still stood of like, get the best skill set you possibly could. And so that was really my logic in becoming an investment banker. And I could not be more grateful for what that early foundation was, because even though I still think of myself as primarily a brand person and a storyteller, to be able to make those decisions through the early days of sitting there on Excel and trying to like really understand, well, how is it that a P&L and a balance sheet and a cash flow work together? That was what I did. And so that left brain, right brain thing has certainly been a throughput of everything I've done first, but that was why. And the pivot came 4 years later, really at a moment when I was doing investing in consumer businesses. And I kind of re-tapped into my love of the operational aspects, my love of the design, the love of that kind of thing that you can't put in a spreadsheet. And I was on a hunt to figure out how to make a career out of that and to find a way to combine these two. And because I was doing investing in consumer businesses, I had the luxury of a bird's eye view on the entire industry. And I actually zeroed in on beauty because I felt like it was the perfect right brain, left brain, that it had the analytics and the repeat purchase and the margins of CPG, but the wild creativity of fashion and retail. And so that was the story. and wrote my little essay to get into Wharton Business School about how I wanted to run a beauty company one day. And here we are.
Well, here we are. I mean, it's been incredible. I think, knowing your history and where you've worked in the past and working at, two category defining brands, Supergoop and now Olaplex, I think you saw the opportunity before anyone else in SPF. And I am pretty, if you look at now, everyone's got SPF in their products. But at the time, no one did. And, you kind of like set the bar in that category. What did you see in that company when you joined it right at the beginning? Because I think you need to have foresight to be able to make that decision.
Yeah, and I will give credit where credit is due. Holly Thaggart, the founder of Supergoop, she was the first one to see that. And she deserves every bit of that. And her story is really one of every entrepreneurial story of the greatness of kind of a problem that then gets solved by someone from outside the industry who doesn't know all the things that are complicated or hard about doing it. But I think that I did join her early on. The business was doing a few $1 million in sales and under 10 people, right? It was a big leap of faith. And I think I like to find the places where I can see maybe the disconnect between the facts. What I mean by that is that I had been in beauty at that point for, 10 years or so. And I remember going to my Clinique training and then teaching us that sunscreen was the number one thing that you really could do for your skin. That it was the most important reason that you got a wrinkle or a spot or something like that. And it was the most important foundation of healthy skin. And yet what was true was what you were saying was that there wasn't sunscreen in a lot of products. It was an industry that had been, was sort of back of the store, seasonal. And I couldn't figure out why that was the case. And so that was the quote unquote disconnect for me that led to seeing white space.
Yeah.
And I think that for me has always been the place that I look. And I think it might be a little bit the investor in me is looking for the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that everything kind of came from that insight, I think, early on. But the purpose of the brand was really rooted in preventing skin cancer. But I think the insight around why a consumer should care about that, because the industry had always come from a place of fear and I would say negativity around you should do this because otherwise you're going to be hurt. We turned it into something that was joyful and fun.
Yeah, I think the way that you disarmed the consumer and made it more fun and playful and accessible, and someone was proud to hold a tube of Supergoop in their hand rather than put it behind the medicine cabinet. I really think that it was a remarkable thing, and until this day, I think people look at Supergoop as an example of a brand that's transformed itself into a much wider category, and now we see Supergoop entering all different types of products. With Olaplex, a very different product, a very different brand, very deep rooted in science and innovation. How have you taken your playbook from Supergoop over to Olaplex?
So I would start by saying I don't believe there's ever a playbook. I think every situation is different. Every business requires, and the world changes so quickly, right?
Quickly.
So, but I think you can have some baseline beliefs that can help guide you. The first one was in similar way that I saw a big opportunity, white space, disconnect, whatever you want to call it, around sunscreen. I see the same in hair. It's a category that I think of as sort of one of the most powerful ways that we express ourselves. People talk about a good hair day, a great hair day. They don't talk about a good clothes day. They don't talk, right? And so there's something so deep in our psychology around how we feel about our hair. That is, and I've had the joy of stamping my passport and going around the world because Olaplex is quite a global business, that you see repeated in similar ways across the world. And yet the understanding of the consumer of how do I get that hair is relatively nascent. Now our hairstylists, they know, right? Exactly. And they are our muse and are kind of the heart and the soul and the heartbeat of this organization. But the consumer starting to really understand that, I think we're in very early days. So so that was where again, I started from the same place. It was the same sort of feeling about something that was in somewhat instinctual about why would I be excited to take this on. And then I think growing a business and making a great business is often the same pillars. They just manifest themselves in different ways. And if we go back to my first story that I was telling you, I see the world through brand. And so I start with, what is this brand? What does it mean? How are we going to express what our purpose is and why we exist and what makes us unique? Because I think that beauty is an emotional category. It's an aesthetically driven category. And in order to communicate, you have to start from a place of brand. And that brand has to be matched with powerful products. So I'm always kind of looking for, how do you connect those two together? And that's the baseline. And how do you do it in a way that no one else is doing? I'm someone who gets up in the morning and I don't want to do things on the margin differently. I'm like, I want to do something that the world has never seen before. I want to kind of hopefully make some sort of mark, I guess, on that. And so that remains consistent. How you build a brand, that changes every week.
100%.
I think the truths of great product remain a little bit more like that baseline. And you're right to point out that the science in this business is so core to who we are. And those are the things that the world sees. I also believe that you have to have a business, and this is a whole other conversation, that looks as good on the inside as it does on the outside, right? So there's a lot of work that has to be done in building a business around, first and foremost, talent, team building, culture, because otherwise it's just a bunch of PowerPoint slides. And how do you function operationally? Being great at the execution is just as important as having an idea of what you're trying to say.
One of the questions I'd like to ask you, Amanda, is about team building. Obviously, building different companies with different teams. Has there been a situation where you've been building a team that, didn't go the right way in the beginning and you had to pivot? And, perhaps you could give me an example.
Yeah, I would say that I have not always batted 1,000 on hiring the right people. And that is a humbling thing to say. And it is a really hard thing to say. And I would say that I've never hired a bad person, but I've tried to put great people into the job that was not right for them. Mm-hmm. And that's always tough. And I think the advice that I got, which is never easy advice to give back, is that you know pretty quickly, and the sooner you make the decision, mm-hmm. the better it is for everybody. Mm-hmm. And that means that's never gotten easier. That conversation has never gotten more fun. Mm-hmm. I hope it never does, because I hope I'm never hardened to sort of thinking that that's ever a good or fun conversation to have. Mm-hmm. But I think I have come around to the realization that it's not a bad conversation to have. And so I think that, and I keep learning that, and I think it's somewhere in this baseball analogy is the fact that nobody bats 1,000, even the best. And I think as a leader, knowing that going in, maybe I think some of the hardest part of leadership is wondering, is it only me? And so I will say out there to others that it's not only you. We all seem to have that happen, and I think, when you make the wrong choice, trying to be thoughtful and empathetic about how you deal with it, I think is the best thing that you can do.
Yeah. Delivering that news is never easy. I play that record in my head often, having those conversations, and it's often the ways that you deliver that news. You have to be so sensitive in how you think about, this role is not for you. You're a great person, and you work hard, but it's not the right fit. But that's always not easy to tell.
Not the best days that I have, but necessary ones.
Yeah. So, Amanda, you've obviously moved from different companies to take up and explore different opportunities. How do you determine when the right time is to explore those opportunities?
I certainly have a story of the opportunities have always told me. And so
I like that.
My life is a series of seeds that were planted well before the phone call comes. And I didn't know it at the time, but then the phone call comes, and I have usually and often a pretty immediate reaction to being like, oh, So I've never gone looking. It's always been inbound, and I think it's really the opportunities have chosen me in many ways.
I love that. For me, it's probably the other way around, that I'm always thinking and I'm a victim to my own thoughts. And I'm always deeply thinking about where the world's going. But sometimes I get that itch and I can't help myself. I've got to test it to see if this works. But I like that because I believe in fate as well.
Yes. It all looks obvious in hindsight sometimes.
It does. It does.
Very well planned out.
A 15-year overnight success. For our listeners who are looking at becoming a CEO of one of their favorite beauty brands, what piece of advice would you give them?
Well, it had been a while since I had started a new job. I was at Supergoop for 7.5 years, and then I came to Olaplex. So I went and I asked myself that very question. And as I think I alluded to before, I tend to ask a lot of people that question. I go and read a lot of things. So I read a lot of books about how to, first 90 days and how to onboard a new organization. And this one.
Let me see it.
I keep all of my books behind me to remind myself. So this is literally called The First 90
Oh my God.
Days.
I thought you were making that up. There's a book with The First 90 Days.
First 90 Days.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not kidding. And then there's one called The New CEO.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you think I'm kidding about these things. So there's 3 or 4 other ones out. This is my bookshelf that I keep as a reminder of and I've read probably 20 times that in terms of leadership books and entrepreneurial stories and things like that. These are the ones that I will pick up again, or I actually love when people come into my office and I've got a lot of young leaders on the team or people who are curious about it. And I'm like, why don't you try reading this one? And that, that's back to what I
love it. I mean, I have a bunch of books in my library as well, and I've made my children read a lot of them as well. The first one was the Ray Dalio book, I forget, Principles.
Oh, Principles.
Yeah, I just thought it's all about radical honesty and transparency.
That's back there too.
And I was like, kids, no more lying to your dad.
Okay. Yeah, parenting and has its own. I don't read as many parenting books. I'm winging that one a little bit more.
Aren't we all?
And so I would say first and foremost is be thinking and learning always. And I think I definitely think that when you come in as a CEO, you don't come in cold. You need to have a little bit of a perspective, even if it's from the outside, about where am I going to go try and figure something out first. And so that first 90 days starts before you walk in the door in your own brain, because people are going to look at you pretty quickly and say, okay, what's the plan? And even if you're not 100% right in what those first instincts are, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't be listening. That doesn't mean that and I did a lot of that, but you got to be kind of moving even the minute that you're walking in the door. So I would say pre-plan. Don't come in cold. Make sure you have a point of view. Be open to changing that point of view. Let me tell you, some of my thoughts were not what they turned out to be, but it just helped me start to do the things that needed to be done quickly.
Yeah, you have to start making decisions, and you'll make a few mistakes, but you'll learn very quickly from iterating. That's how I feel too. I think that's the only way, and also you get the respect from others as well when you start making some decisions. I think that's something that
just let's sort of listen and move at the same time.
Exactly.
Is the balance that is in any CEO's life, and be willing to be wrong. Be willing to be like, that hunch was just totally off.
Do you have mentors that you work with?
I have mentors of many different forms. I have people that I would consider in that what I'll call traditional mentor relationship, or people that I have worked with or for at various points in my career, who each have a unique way of different things I've learned from each of them. And so I often will call on them for different things in what I'll call an informal way. I have my fellow CEO network who are mentors of a different form. As we were saying before, sometimes one of the things about being in our shoes is that you don't necessarily have a peer group in your organization. And so finding it's the other piece of advice I give to any first-time CEOs: go find other CEOs that you can talk to and understand and trade notes with in your industry or outside of it. And I think the third is I do have a coach. I'm very open about that because I think that it's important that people recognize I have a coach, I have a great exec chair, I have an incredible board, I have a lot of other people that are helping me figure out what to do and how to do it. And being a CEO isn't about having all the answers.
That's
it's
right.
about being willing to ask the questions and have a point of view and help a team figure out the answers and get there. So it takes a village.
It does. It does take a village.
You get one person on these podcasts. I'm always want everybody to realize. And I think, mentorship goes in a lot of different ways. I think that I learn a lot from my team. I learn a lot from hearing from young people who are starting off in their career and what they're thinking about. So lots happening.
No, that's great. You make it seem so simple, but it's a lot of people that go behind you. I mean, I feel the same way. I feel very lucky to have so many people out there to support you, and everyone wants you to win. So it's a great team sport. I think, one of the things that, I admire about you, Amanda, is that you build very, very strong teams from within as a company. You've done it repeatedly. What are the things, like when you first went into Olaplex, you're meeting new people, you're getting the lay of the land, you're looking behind the closets for everything and figuring out things for the first time. You're coming into a public company. This is not a private company. This is something that you're living daily in front of everyone. I know you and I've talked about this before in the past about running a public company versus a private company. And you've said to me, look, it's the same thing. It's just that, you go back to the rules and how you build your business. What are the things that you do in building the right employees? Do you have a cadence that you look for from within and how you operate with your teams and your partners, and because you're running a very large organization, so where do you start?
Many layers to that question. And again, I think there's no perfect answer, and there's no universal answer. And I think that every organization and individual is unique and different. I think you have to understand what you're trying to build, and then you have to build a team that is well suited to that road ahead and wants that road ahead, right? I believe you have to love what's in front, what you do. Otherwise, kind of what's the point? So I think, and I had some inklings coming into this of like, okay, I know I need a really strong innovation engine. I know that we have a lot of work to go from just a product to being a brand. I knew we have infrastructure to build. Like, I had some instincts about the types of talent that were going to be required. What was different from this versus Supergoop was Supergoop, I could sit everyone around the table and I could know them. And this, I don't have that luxury. Although I hope that over time I will get to know every single person, but it was just a bigger company to start with. So I really started with my leadership team, because I think that I am only so good as the team that's around me. And the best advice that I got from someone was start there, because you got to start there, and then they're going to help get their team in place. And then it's just going to kind of flow through the organization, especially when you can't see everything. And again, that's like one of the most humbling aspects of being a CEO of any size business, is that you are so far from doing anything on your own. It's like you can say, I believe this is the right direction, but everybody else is going to take you there. And so really my first year on the job was about understanding where we wanted to go and making sure that I had the leaders in place that were able to take us there. And I'm very proud to say that we have an extremely talented team that really is blossoming and really coming together to kind of rally around the mission that we have ahead of us.
It definitely resonates with me. I feel, as many people in my company, when you're building a business, everyone's putting their hat into the ring and banking on you leading the way. And it's sometimes it can be very lonely up there. Like you've really got to share as much as you possibly can about what the vision is of what you're building, because sometimes it definitely is non-linear. And things change. I think you said that earlier on today, was that things change so differently and you need different skill sets. And I think both you and I have lived through so many ups and downs in the macro world, and we've had many late night calls, trying to figure out what's going on in the world today. And we live in interesting times, to say the least. The latest event that we've both started to have right in front of us is AI, and we were recently both at the WWD conference in New York. AI is a big part, and everyone talks about the impact of what AI does. And I still think AI in the beauty industry is still trying to figure things out. I was curious if you had any hot takes as it relates to Olaplex.
I mean, I think it's exciting, right? I think one sees technological shifts, and I always try and filter out, is this a moment or a movement? Because we've seen a few over the course of the last period of time, and really dialing into, is this something that's going to be transformational, or is this something that's sort of cool and buzzy right now? And I look at AI, I mean, I'm certainly not unique in this point of view, that this is transformational, right? This will really fundamentally change how we think about things. But I also know that I'm not an expert. So I believe in learning. I believe in educating. And when feels like there's change in the air,
Mm-hmm.
I just start asking a lot of questions, and I start reading a lot, and I start to try and understand, where are the patterns? Where do I see consistency? Because certainly at something like this, there's a lot of conversation, and I'm always like, but what do I actually do? How do I take this into the organization? How do I make this real versus sound like I'm saying the right thing?
That's right.
So as an operator, I really default to, I know what the challenges are with our organization. Can I solve them in this way? And that's really how I'm thinking about AI, is that we have a lot of opportunity ahead of us. We are, in the grand scheme of things, still a young company. We're building a lot. What happens if I build it from that point of view from the get-go? And I think that's really exciting. But you have to balance what you can change and how quickly you can change it. And are we going to be on the cutting edge of something? Or are we going to start to learn from other? And you pick your places within an organization.
There's so many areas that we get hit with AI, and and internally we're very much focused on helping our brand scale across platforms. Trying to figure out better ways to optimize and use different affiliates to scale brands on TikTok and YouTube Shopping. And the thing with beauty, I think, goes back to the power of the brand, that you can't disrupt legacy brands which have got strong values and are creating amazing product. So I think the one thing that I think where you guys sit right now in the hair category is very much as these very strong innovation foundational formulas that have been proven time and time again. I have Olaplex in my shower. I think I've told you before, and continue to use number 5. Recently I've noticed you guys have done some new initiatives around branding and marketing, and I'm very interested to hear about some of the things that you're doing. And I saw you've used some of the actors and actresses from White Lotus recently in some of your campaigns, which was great to see. And how do you think about, pop culture when you start marketing and being, timely with these moments in time in marketing?
Yeah, so a lot of layers to that. I think to start with, we have an extraordinary product. And that is the thing that has carried this business to where it is today, is unique science, unique efficacy. What an incredible place to start. What we didn't have when I began was really what I'll call a brand with a capital B. And that's how you express yourself. That's how you tell a story. That's how you look and show up visually. And again, we live in a highly emotional category that is expressed through various, often digital, some physical. What do you look like on a Sephora shelf, on an Ulta shelf? When you show up we didn't have a way of expressing ourselves, is the best way to articulate it. So you have all this science in a highly emotional category without language that allows you to tell your story. So we had to first develop the language. And what that is going back to classic brand training. And this is something that, as much as the world changes so much, I don't think this has necessarily changed. How you do it has changed, how you might express, but what makes a great brand to me has always been, can you say that is Olaplex or that is Supergoop, or you pick your favorite and you know when it's been nailed, when you're like, that just looks like something totally unique and different that no one else could do.
Mm-hmm.
We had to start with a point of view about what was that going to be
That's
for
so
us.
true.
Which had to also connect with what our long-term vision was of what we wanted to build, right? Because your visual expression, your copywriting, all those things have to somehow be laddering up to where do I want to be over time. Often I think those branding things come from a place of authenticity in the origin story of an organization. And so that's where I went to figure it out. Was into the lab to understand the science, and lots of time with our stylists to really understand their worlds, and really uncovered in this, we'll call it archaeological dig, that the magic of Olaplex was where the science comes to life in the chair.
Yep.
And I say born in the lab, brought to the chair, and
Yep.
this alchemy of science and style. That was what we needed to express.
Yep.
And we had to find the unique visual language to do that connected with Olaplex. And so that was job number one, was what do we look like? Job number two became, how do I start to tell that story in what I'll call the brand platform that was going to go along with that visual. And that was something that we rolled out. And so we flipped every image in this organization over the course of about a year, every VM, every website, like the whole thing. We did that in end of February. And then in April, we launched what's called Design to Defy. And I think of that as really our brand platform of what's the ethos that we're trying to communicate over time. And now we're on a journey to iterate and build around those baseline things. And that's never done. That work is never done.
Yeah.
And you get better and better at it, and you find where you're getting, and marketing today is so nuanced and, quite frankly, so fragmented, right? So the rate at which you have to test, learn, iterate, produce, again, this is maybe where AI will have an interesting role to play. I don't know that that's all figured out yet. If somebody has the answer, I will certainly take it. Is how do I use some technology to get better at that? And there's certainly some early places where I think it's quite interesting. So that's the brand building journey that we've really been on. And when you think about pop culture, I think that's really about taking your story. What do I have to say? And putting it in the language and the moments that matter to the consumer, because we're all so bombarded with so many things. So what right do I have to ask someone to pay attention to me? I've got to be able to express what I have to say in a way that feels relevant to what I'll call the cultural zeitgeist.
Yep.
And so the White Lotus story is kind of incredible because we didn't go and make that up.
Yep.
Tracy Cunningham, who is the original colorist who put the original Olaplex on people's hair and said, oh my gosh, this is really going to change the industry. She did the blondes for White Lotus.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, we should be talking about that, right?
Amazing.
And so that led to the events and the content and all the things around it. But I think that's what really great branding is a unique story, but one that comes from just like a deep, deep sense of clarity of self and authenticity. And that's what we really are on a mission to build. And the great gift of this brand is I don't have to go try to make that up, right? It's not manufactured, and it is coming from a real lab and real stylists who are doing things that are actually what we're talking about.
I think what you said about the authenticity, I mean, I love the Tracy Cunningham story because she's well known for what she is as a stylist. But, these influencers these days who are educating your customers one by one about the benefits of using Olaplex, education is the big unlock, I think, for the brand. And the problem with today, as we both know, is that the attention economy is very hard to get that education in front of the users. We know there's 500 million monthly active users on YouTube and TikTok. There's 160 million users on Amazon Prime. So getting your content in front of the consumer educating them is not an easy feat. Before it was easy on Instagram because you just go to the people with the most followers, but we know that's the efficiency of using those influencers doesn't work as well. So I guess in this new world of distribution and using creators and stylists, it gets very complicated. It's not easy for any brand
it is way more complex than when I started at Clinique and you had a counter and you made one picture with one headline for your launch, and people came to the counter and you sat them down and you taught them, and whatever they learned was often what your amazing Clinique person would teach you at the counter. But like it was very linear and it was controlled. But in some ways, I think there's sort of an amazing conversation that's happening now. So I do think is there a lot coming at us? Sure. That's why I think this sort of cultural relevance and getting someone's attention at the earliest moment has to come from something that's going to pique my curiosity. But I find that we live in a world where people really want to know, right? They really want to know and understand. And that's what I'm excited about, is because I think that that's really where there's an incredible opportunity to say, okay, people really want to know about the category that I don't think has ever explained itself super well.
Yeah.
I think that we have a lot of work to do to explain our own product much better than we do today.
Yeah.
And so how do I get the attention? In some ways is different than what I do with it once I have it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where the education is so fascinating to me, because how do you find that sweet spot of giving someone what they need to know? And everybody wants a different thing, right? You have some people who want to go all the way there with you on the science, and some people just want to know that it works. And that's kind of amazing that we can actually create things and think about it to be much more thoughtful about sort of meeting people where they are versus saying, this is what I got, you have to take it. So, and I think that's really, that's why this is complicated and not a light switch to be turned on.
I love your answer there, because I do think that you have to be quite nebulous in the way that you think about approaching marketing, but you have a strong point of view, you have something to say. And I think many brands, just put too much content out there without really thinking about keeping that thread that goes through everything that the brand stands for. And, the brands that we've seen, as you know, the barrier to launch a brand these days is so low. Anyone could do it. And many raise a lot of money in the beginning in their seed rounds. And, not a day goes by till you see a new brand being launched. But I think hair care is widely misunderstood in general. I think that you've got the professional lines, and then you've got a lot of these indie lines that have recently popped up, which are backed by, influencers. But I think when you think of a brand, it has to stand for something and it has to work. And I'm super excited to see where it goes, because, we've had the opportunity to work with you in the Asian markets in China and be your partner there. And it's been incredible to see the success that you guys have had with, a completely different demographic and different age group. When you think about your business as a global scale, obviously things have changed very much dramatically over the last 6 months and continue to change. How do you think about balancing, everything you do here in the US and all the other geographical markets?
Yeah, and I think we've been talking a lot about kind of how we're thinking about our international opportunity, what we need to do to be able to get at it, that's the other half of the journey that I'm on. And our business is, call it 50-50, US versus international. So it's quite a significant international footprint, especially for a business at our generation, right? We're 11 years old this month. And that to me is incredibly exciting, because I already know that we have the proof points that there is resonance of the product across the world. 70 countries where people's response to the technology, and that's not to be taken for granted, right, is like, this will work on my hair and I can actually deliver something that, because again, hair care has to work, right? It's got to deliver on the benefits. And it instantaneously, right? I would even say that skincare, you get a little bit more grace, and maybe this will work over time. Sunscreen, you're going to wake up in 30 years and know if you've been using it every day. Hair care, I know the minute I get shower and dry my hair if this is the
Exactly.
right match for me. So you've got to be able to deliver. So we have something that delivers. We have something that's delivered to the consumer, and we also have something that's delivered to the pro. And so that's the really exciting place that we're starting. What we're working on now is making sure that we know how to access that opportunity. And what that has really entailed is making sure that we have the right partner in the core markets and that we are being the right partner back to them. So the amount of time that we're spending with your team thinking through, do you have the right things to go be successful? Are we getting the right information back? And how is that relationship working? That's probably been one of the single biggest shifts that we've been making in terms of how we're approaching our international business, is not taking it for granted that will all happen. And I think that that's an exciting and long-term journey. And I think what's happening in China is obviously very dynamic, and being thoughtful about kind of how do we, again, take advantage of what I think is a huge opportunity in that market, and doing it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm going back to an early conversation we had, probably 6 months ago, and what I really love about how you think is like you're a long-term thinker, because I think once you've decided on that long-term point, and I think you remember that conversation, you just start making the micro decisions to continue in that vein. And I think most people get sidetracked very quickly about what happens very in the short term without thinking about the long term. Because I think, we're in a massive category in hair care, massive, and it's only going to get bigger and stronger. And, I'm more of the opinion that, we'll get more concentrated into the stronger brands rather than fragmented to too many of the smaller brands. No, it's very exciting to where you've got to, Amanda. I'm very, obviously very impressed. I wanted to ask one of the last questions was, what's been the most rewarding side of building a business in the public domain?
For me, the most rewarding thing that I do is always the team, right? It's knowing that I've been able to be a part of somebody's career and that they've learned a lot and that they say, I've made a difference at what I do. So that for me is always what it is. I think within the public domain, I take very seriously my obligations as a public company CEO. As you alluded to before, I think that means I need to build a long-term business, but I have to do it in a way that's thoughtful about all of the appropriate obligations that I have to deliver. So I always live with one foot in today and another foot, several years out, and toggle between the two. But for me, I always think internally, and I've always believed that if I can get that part right, the things that the rest of the world sees, they'll happen. And we'll just chip away at it over time. But when I look back on my life and my career, it's the team first. And then it never gets old when I meet somebody who says they've used the product and they like it. So that no matter how many times I hear that, that'll never get old.
You're doing a fantastic job. Super, super proud of what you've done, Amanda, and really excited, one, for our friendship in the future, but what we're both building separately and together. So thanks for joining me on the pod today. It's been really great. One last thing, I do this with all my guests. I give each of my members a record. Today, I've chosen ABBA for you.
I love that.
I'm putting it in the post. I'm sending it to you. I'm not sure if you do you have a vinyl player at home?
My dad does.
Does he? Okay. Well,
it's gonna play it with him. Mm-hmm. I should. That would make me way cooler, but I'll have to work on that.
You're cool Very enough. Cool. No, but Amanda, we'll see you in New York soon, and we'll go out for a glass of wine. It's great to see you. Thanks again, Amanda.